I never wanted trouble. That's the first thing you should know about me. I made my money early, too early some would say, running a logistics company that handled high-value, high-risk freight. When I sold the business, I walked away with enough to retire at 43. No kids, no debt, no drama. Just me, my German Shepherd, and a desire for peace. That's why I moved here. Crescent Ridge, a picture-perfect gated community nestled between wooded hills and golf course views. The kind of place where the grass is always trimmed, neighbors wave while jogging, and the only crime is someone's garden gnome going missing. Of course, all of that order comes at a price. Enter the Homeowners Association, a well-oiled, clipboard-carrying machine determined to preserve the character of the neighborhood. Every blade of grass, every mailbox color, and every vehicle must fall within their sacred guidelines. Most people fall in line without question, and I did too, for a while. Followed the rules, paid my dues, stayed out of sight. I didn't need attention. I just wanted to be left alone. But the thing is, people only pay attention to what they can see. And while they were watching driveways and measuring grass height, they completely ignored what lay beneath it all. And me? I've always liked owning the one thing no one thinks to check. It started with a letter. Plain white envelope, HOA logo stamped at the top. I didn't think much of it until I opened it and read the words. You are hereby fined $500 for violating Section 4, Subsection B, unauthorized parking on community property. I blinked, reread it, then walked outside, half expecting to see some mistake. My driveway? Empty. My garage? Closed. My own truck was parked legally, as always. Confused, I paced down to the curb. Then it hit me. 2 days ago, I'd hired a contractor to fix a drainage issue near my property line. His work truck had been parked on, the public road outside my home for maybe 5 hours max. He even left before sunset. I figured it was just a misunderstanding. Maybe some clipboard warrior got overzealous. So I sent a polite email to the HOA's general inbox, explaining the situation, attaching time-stamped footage from my door camera, and asking for the fine to be removed. 3 days later, I received a response. It wasn't an apology, not even an acknowledgement of the video, just a cold, pre-written reply. Per HOA regulations, any unauthorized vehicle parked within community limits is subject to fines. All fines are final and non-negotiable. No signature, no name, just robotic indifference. That was the moment. I realized this wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a warning shot. The next fine came exactly 7 days later. This time, $1,000. Reason? Repeat violation. I hadn't even had any workers over. My driveway was pristine. I even parked my own truck further up the street just to be safe. Still, the letter came. No explanation, no opportunity to appeal. I called the HOA office. Straight to voicemail. Then the fine started to snowball, $2,500 the next week. Then another $3,000 for failure to comply. And with each envelope, my patience thinned. I tried emailing again. Nothing. I left voicemails. No response. That's when I decided to attend the monthly HOA meeting. I walked into the clubhouse, clipboard in hand, wearing a polite smile and every bit of composure I could summon. It was standing room only, residents murmuring about garden, fences, and pool permits. Then, as if waiting for her cue, she took the mic. Karen.HOA president. Early 50s, bleached hair pulled tight enough to snap, and the smugness of someone who's never been told, no. She looked at me over her glasses and said, loud enough for the whole room to hear, let's talk about chronic violators. We've had several repeat offenses on Oakview Lane, someone who clearly thinks the rules don't apply to him. I felt 30 heads swivel toward me. My face burned, but I didn't flinch. After the meeting, I approached her calmly, papers in hand. Believe there's been a mistake, I said, laying out the documents. The vehicles you fined me for weren't even mine. I have proof. She didn't even look. She smiled, that kind of smile people wear when they enjoy watching you squirm, and said, you're not above the rules. If you can't respect this community, maybe you don't belong here. I stared at her. That smug expression, the absolute certainty that she'd won. Flashback to last year. I'd volunteered to help modernize the HOA's archaic online system. I'd proposed simple solutions. Automatic records, digital meeting minutes, increased transparency. Karen had shut it down in under 5 minutes. No need, she'd said. Everything works just fine the way it is. I realized then, this wasn't about parking. It wasn't even about rules. It was about control. The final straw came 2 weeks later. Another envelope. But this time, not just a fine. A letter from the HOA attorney. As of this date, your accumulated violations total $30,000. If unpaid within 30 days, a lien will be placed on your property. Additional legal action may follow. No hearing, no mediation. Just a demand for 30 grand and a legal threat. To take my home, that was the moment. I remember standing there in my kitchen, holding that letter, the weight of it somehow heavier than it should have been. And I said to myself, calmly, almost too calmly, all right then. If it's war they want, let's give them a blockade. Now, here's the part Karen never saw. Coming. Remember how I mentioned I liked owning things people ignore? Well, I own the road, not metaphorically. I literally own the single narrow strip of asphalt that winds from the main highway, through the wooded bend, and into Crescent Ridge. The only way in or out. Years ago, when I was still in the logistics business, I picked up little plots of land, wherever I could, mostly as part of tax strategies. One of those plots was a useless-looking stretch of gravel road sold to me by an old farmer who was offloading everything before moving south. At the time, it was just dirt and trees. Then the neighborhood exploded with new construction. Developers paved over that gravel stretch and tied it directly into the community layout. I never stopped them. No one asked for easement rights, no one paid a dime, and frankly, I didn't care. It was just a road, so I let it be. For years, they used it freely. I even paid to have it resurfaced once just to avoid potholes ruining my own tires. But technically, it's still mine, on paper, on maps, and now, legally vulnerable. Funny thing about control, it makes people blind to what they don't think can be taken away. They thought they owned the rules. I owned the road. Now it was time to make that painfully clear. First step, cover my bases. I scheduled a meeting with a real estate attorney. Sharp guy, ex-military, the kind who smells blood in paperwork. I laid out the title, the original land. Deed, the plat maps. He raised his eyebrows as he scanned through it all. You're telling me they've been using your land without any formal agreement? He asked. I nodded. For over a decade, he laughed. You've got them by the throat. We filed a document with the county confirming my ownership and reasserting my private rights over the road. The next day, I met with a civil engineer who helped me draw up proper signage, traffic flow implications, and legal verbiage for limited access. The signs were elegant, but firm. Private access road. Use permission revocable by owner. Trespassing subject to removal. I installed 3 of them, one at the entrance, one midway, and one just before the gatehouse where the HOA had placed their own neighborhood sign, like it was theirs. Then came the certified letters. I sent them directly to the HOA board, each. UN-stamped, signed, and delivered with return receipt. I included legal notice of my ownership, evidence of unregulated usage, and a politely worded message. Due to recent misuse of my property, I am revoking all unpermitted access effective immediately unless a formal agreement is reached. I knew they wouldn't take it seriously, and right on cue, Karen sent me a reply. Mr. Martin, thank you for your concern. Your message has been reviewed and noted. Please refrain from making threats to the HOA or its residents. Any attempt to interfere with the road will result in legal action. No lawyer copied. No understanding of the situation. She thought it was a bluff. Good. That's when I circled one date on my calendar. One night she'd never forget. the HOA's annual gala night, an obnoxious, over-the-top event they held every year at the neighborhood's private clubhouse. Karen's pride and joy, complete with catered food, a DJ, and guest appearances from local politicians and real estate developers. They closed the clubhouse parking lot days ahead of the event. Valet services were scheduled. Dozens of guests would be driving in and out, many unfamiliar with the neighborhood layout. Traffic would be spectacular. I had a plan. But I needed one more thing to make it perfect. Weather. So I watched the forecast like a hawk. The day of the gala, rain, heavy, steady, starting at 6 p.m. That was my green light. In bad weather, no one walks, no one carpools, everyone drives, which meant everyone had to pass through my road, the one road in or out, so I waited. I watched. And at precisely 6:45 p.m., when the party was in full swing and the valet lot was full, I made my move. It was almost too easy. I rolled out my flatbed truck, the same one I used years ago for cross-country freight, parked it diagonally, across the road, on my property, blocking the exit completely. Then I stepped out, rain tapping on my jacket, and placed a large laminated sign on the back of the trailer. Temporary access suspended due to unauthorized use. Contact property owner for resolution. And just like that, the gates were sealed. By 7:15, the honking started. People trying to leave early, guests looking for alternate exits. But there were none. Crescent Ridge had one way in, one way out, and I owned it. Neighbors in cocktail dresses stood in the rain shouting at valets. Uber drivers circled helplessly, unable to pick up passengers. Alexis tried to nudge around my truck. No chance. Then she arrived. Karen. Hair frizzing from the downpour, dress clinging to her frame, heels clicking furiously against the wet pavement. A crowd followed behind her like an angry parade. "What is this?" she screamed at me. I stayed calm, pulled out a plastic sleeve from my coat, and handed her a copy of the certified letter she had ignored. "I warned you, Karen," I said, loud enough for the phone's recording to catch every word. "You fined me for a parked vehicle. Consider this a demonstration. You can't do this," she snapped. "This is public access." "No," I said, pointing at the signs. "This is private property, my property, and permission is revoked." Someone gasped. Someone laughed. Cameras flashed. And Karen? She turned red, then white, then utterly, perfectly silent. I've seen all kinds of reactions in my life. Corporate meltdowns, angry truckers, even a few physical threats when freight got delayed. But nothing prepared me for Karen in crisis, soaked in rain, face twisted in a cocktail of rage and disbelief. She stomped up to my flatbed like she was going to physically shove it aside. "Move. This." "Truck," she snapped, jabbing her manicured finger in my face, and I stayed calm. Too calm, really. I reached into my waterproof folder and handed her a copy of the $30,000 fine letter she'd sent me weeks ago. Bold, red lettering still bright. "I believe you taught me the value of enforcement," I said, her mouth opened. Nothing came out at first. Then, "You arrogant piece of... You think you can just... This is harassment. It's illegal. I'll have you arrested." Behind her, cell phones were out. Neighbors. Guests. A few teens I didn't even recognize. "We're live streaming, ma'am," I replied, voice even. "This is my property. I have all documentation. You've been using it without permission. That ends tonight." Cue the sirens. A police cruiser pulled up, probably called by a panicked guest who assumed a crime was being committed. Karen turned to them like they were cavalry. "There he is. That's the man. He's blocking the only road in. Detain him." The officer raised a brow, walked over to me. I handed over the deed and the documentation, all neat, sealed in plastic against the rain. He took 10 minutes reviewing it, made a few calls, then came back and shrugged. "You're within your rights, sir." Karen lost it, absolutely snapped. She screamed at the cop, at me, at the growing crowd. Tears mixed with rain, voice cracking with humiliation, and every second of it was caught on camera. It didn't take long. By morning, the video had over 2 million views on TikTok. The headline? HOA traps guests in luxury neighborhood. Owner blocks road after $30K fine. Local news stations picked it up next. I didn't speak to the press, but the footage spoke for itself. Karen's screeching, my quiet replies. The cop calmly siding with me. Then came the avalanche. A city council member held a press conference condemning HOA abuse and praising my legal knowledge. This is a wake-up call, he said, about unchecked power in private community boards. The HOA's own legal counsel tried to go into damage control, but under scrutiny, it came out that Karen had never formally informed the board about escalating fines on me. She'd acted unilaterally, which, legally, meant she'd overstepped her authority. Residents were livid, not just because of the road closure, but because they'd been left in the dark, fined randomly, and now publicly embarrassed. By the end of the week, more than 40 homeowners signed a petition demanding Karen and the board step down. A few even threatened a class action lawsuit, citing mishandling of funds and procedural violations. And then came the real blow. A whistleblower on the board leaked emails showing that Karen had been using HOA fines to cover personal expenses, spa trips, consulting fees to her cousin, even first-class tickets to a property management retreat in Aruba. That, as they say, was checkmate. It took less than a month for everything to collapse. Karen resigned in disgrace, red-faced and tight-lipped at a special HOA meeting packed with angry residents and reporters. She left under escort, avoiding every camera, muttering about lawsuits that never came. But her problems were just beginning. Forensic audit uncovered tens of thousands of dollars in misused HOA funds. The new board pressed charges. She was sued, fined, and forced to sell her home to cover the debt. Word spread fast. She didn't just lose her position, she lost everything. The cherry on top, the HOA, under new leadership, voted to formally apologize to me in writing. They waived the $30,000 in fines, refunded the first $500, and offered to cover any legal fees I'd incurred. I didn't take the money. I didn't need it. I just smiled and said, "Consider it a lesson in respect." The neighborhood changed. After that, people nodded a little more, waved a little longer. Some even brought cookies and said thank you for standing up to that tyrant. But I wasn't quite done. I had one last move to make. A few weeks later, I filed the last piece of paperwork. I met with the city council and handed over the deed to the road. I donated it, on one condition, that it would be permanently maintained as public access, untouchable by any HOA, board, or private entity. They agreed. The city took ownership, paved it smooth, and installed proper lighting. The neighborhood would never again be held hostage by someone who thought power meant control. But I left something behind. Right at the beginning of the road, on a small polished stone slab, I installed a plaque. It read, "Donated in honor of the power of petty fines." People laughed when they saw it, some rolled their eyes, but a few clapped. Karen's house went on the market. New families moved in. The HOA rebranded, downsized, and got a lot quieter. As for me, I went back to my peaceful routines, coffee at sunrise, walks with my dog, and the satisfaction of knowing I never raised my voice, never broke a law, and still brought down an empire of pettiness. They tried to trap me with fines. I trapped them with the road. A few months later, I stopped by a small coffee shop in the next town over. It was one of those quiet spots where the baristas write your name with hearts on the cup and ask about your day like they mean it. That's when I saw her, Karen, wearing a green apron, wiping down tables, and doing everything in her power to avoid eye contact. I didn't approach, didn't need to, but the guy in line behind me, clearly a local, squinted at her and said, "Hey, didn't you used to live in that fancy gated community, Crescent Ridge?" Karen froze. Her eyes went dark. Then, in a voice hollowed out by humiliation and regret, she muttered, "Don't talk to me about roads." I sipped my coffee, turned, and walked out, smiling all the way back to my car, which, by the way, was legally parked on a public street. Poetic, really.